Greetings and welcome, or welcome back as the case may be. Today's Wednesday, so it's time to talk a little bit about writing or prompt. Today I've decided, since we did a prompt last week, that we'll talk a little bit about some writing. One of the big things I'll talk about is because writing modern and the modern style in the modern marketplace is a bit different from when I was growing up in the 70s and 80s. Bottom line, a lot of the greats of science fiction and fantasy, which is what I happen to read and write in, would not do well in the modern setting. Primarily because one of the big switches is that modern audiences pretty much expect and require more of a, shall we call it, a cinematic version of writing. That is, every line, every paragraph, every page must support the story, must progress the story in some way. That doesn't mean there needs to be a fight every single page or something like that. But they're not going to sit there and read through pages and pages of lore and backstory and all of this. They're not going to sit there and read a page of description of the trees in the forest and things like this. They expect everything that hits that page to progress and move the story. Now, I got to admit, I have a hard time with this. To me, a book is not a movie. It is not something that must pop and snap and move. So I have a little trouble writing that way. But it can be done. And with a good editor helping you out, your pacing can definitely be tightened. But, I have to admit, I think a book is different from a movie in that you've got space and you've got time to open up, to let things breathe, to move a little slower than a movie has to, because you got 400 and some odd pages instead of, at most, 2 hours. There are some movies that go for 2.5, 3, but overall, audiences aren't going to put up with a movie that goes that long. They want to see action. They want to see things moving. They want to see things progressing. And to be perfectly honest, they treat books the same way these days. So that's probably why, if you are a fan of Asimov and Heinlein and people like that, like I am, Langle, who we'll talk about that later, trust me, they dragged a little bit. They slogged. Well, not really, but they did. Their stories do move a little more slowly, a little more carefully than what you'll find on the modern bookshelf. So keep that in mind as you start writing, that you don't have to have an action scene hit every chapter, but you do need to make the story progress. You do need to grab interest and hold it, because otherwise they DNF your book and it sits on a pile or goes to the used bookstore. So, yeah, there's the reality of things. Maybe someday it'll swing back a little bit and we'll be able to have a little more time to play and breathe, but not today. And on that note, I'll bid you a good day. We'll talk to you later. Have a good one. Bye.